3 Ukrainian UJ-26 drones streaked through Russian airspace when their world went black. GPS vanished, satellites went silent, and their displays became nothing but inked screens while an unseen adversary closed in. What unfolded next read like a technical impossibility. 6 drones had penetrated Russian territory hunting the most dangerous prize they could find. A military train 38 cars long, its loadout enough to obliterate an entire city block. They were not meant to survive this far. Russian electronic warfare had already tried to steal their nav, seize their command links, and blind their sensors. These were not flimsy commercial quadcopters. The Beavers carried a single trick the Russians hadn't accounted for. The opening move to reach the train was simple and brutal. Blind the air defense's eye by taking out one transformer. Miss it, and the drones become target practice. Hit it, and you buy 20 minutes of blackout. But between the attackers and that transformer loomed Russia's nastiest intercept system. The Repellant One attempted a mid-flight hijack, broadcasting forged commands ordering the Ukrainian drones to land, or RTB. Operators watched their consoles expectant for the takeover. It never arrived. The Beaver's command links hopped frequencies 1,000 times per second, changing channels faster than any jammer could follow. Frequency hopping is nothing new, invented during WW. One day, but done right, it makes the difference between drones that obey hostile commands and drones that shrug them off. Half the formation had already peeled away. The southern trio diverted into the Seversky Donets Valley, adding some 40 kilometers but keeping below radar horizons. Ukrainian analysts had mapped every lookout along the frontier and located invisible corridors. Terrain formed blind spots, barely wide enough for a drone to slip through. Flying those corridors meant threading a needle at 180 km/h. 1 kilometer left, and an S-300 locks you. 1 kilometer right, and you fall beneath a mobile M2 battery. Pilots had to hold an exact height, rise above 150 feet, and they paint every screen from here to Moscow. The split paid off. While Russian operators vectored Panzer batteries toward heat signatures near the M4 highway, 3 more drones ghosted the river valley at 25 meters altitude. Their radar horizon was 20 kilometers. The planet itself hid them. In the Russian command center, officers faced a nightmare. Commit mobile units north and expose the south, or split forces and risk both groups breaking through. Seconds ticked. The approach to Orlovski required unique tactics. The substation sat on high ground with long sightlines. Any airframe there would be exposed over a kilometer. Ukrainian planners had flagged a possible weakness, a cell tower 800 meters southwest that might cast an electromagnetic shadow. If it still existed, that blind spot would open the path to Salsk and the ammunition train. But intel was 2 weeks old. Move a single mobile radar, and the drones fly into a killing field. The lead pilot's fingers tightened on the sticks as they neared the presumed shadow. There was no way to verify it until they were committed. Breaking cover in the last 400 meters would leave the Zu-23 crews less than 8 seconds to react. 8 seconds can feel like an eternity when twin 23mm barrels are pointed at you. 1 drone had to go first, betting its life on stale intel. 3 survivors were needed, 1 for the transformer, 2 for what came next at Salsk. The northern pair reached the Orlovski power station at 02:26. They had threaded 89 kilometers of hostile airspace using a technique called radar gate threading, finding and flying exact gaps between hill-formed radar shadows. The drones popped over ridgelines for precisely 2.898 seconds, long enough to correct course but too brief for automated systems to classify them as true targets, then dove back into concealment. Essentially, they played peekaboo with radar arrays all the way to their objective. 2 Zu-23 positions had been hurriedly in place to protect the substation, crews wide awake now and hunting. The Zu-23 is old Soviet iron that refuses to die. Twin 23mm autocannons spitting around 2,000 rounds per minute, with an effective envelope near 2,500 meters. Against jets at 500 knots, they're marginal. Against 180 km/h drones, a nightmare, if the gunner can keep the target in sight. From the lead Beaver's thermal feed, the objective loomed, a mammoth 330 kV transformer the size of a small building. This single unit fed 6 air defense sites, including a Panzer battery to the south. Destroy it and the local air defense network collapses like stacked cards. Here, the plan sharpened. 2 kilometers out, the 3 Beavers formed a classic pincer. The lead climbed to 300 meters, deliberately drawing fire. Both Zu-23 crews swung up, tracer streams knitting a lethal ceiling, exactly what the plan required. While gunners focused skyward, the other two drones hugged terrain and closed from opposite flanks. The second popped up at 100 meters from the fence, too close for the Zu-23s to depress their barrels and engage. Gunners cursed as they overran depression limits. The drone slipped past a maintenance shed. The lead executed a barrel roll through tracer streams, a trick learned from studying Russian gun camera footage. Tracers move predictably. The gunner leads the same amount every time, and a sudden reversal mid-roll forces an overcorrection. The third exploited the chaos, threading between two high-voltage lines spaced 10 meters apart, forcing defenders to hold fire or risk vaporizing critical infrastructure. One slip and those lines would turn a drone into plasma. All three converged on the transformer from distinct vectors. The low drone hit the base first, rupturing cooling lines. Its 20 kilo KZ-6-shaped charge detonated on impact, molten copper punching through steel like tissue. Cooling oil met superheated metal and flashed to vapor. Fuel-air deflagration launched a 60-meter fireball skyward. 2 seconds later, the hydro phase dove straight down. Its warhead ripped the top bushing. The third struck the control cabinet that might have isolated the damage. 3 strikes from 3 angles, no escape. Then the grid betrayed itself. With nowhere to go, 330,000 volts turned the atmosphere into a conductor. Massive arcs arced between exposed contacts, each carrying the equivalent of 1,000 lightning strikes. Circuit breakers attempted isolation, but the fault cascaded. Protective relays tripped substations in sequence. Half the region plunged into darkness. Military sites fired up emergency gensets, but diesel takes time and electronics require clean power. For the next 20 minutes, radars would flicker, command nodes, reboot, and every linked air defense unit would be degraded. All while 3 Ukrainian drones were already sprinting toward the rail hub. At 0233, the Panzer S-1 crew at Salsk watched their picture unravel. The power surge from Orlovski had propagated like an electric tsunami, knocking offline early warning radars, command nodes, and comms that fed targeting data. The Panzer still had truck power, its engine humming, but the system is meant to be one node in a net. Without supporting infrastructure, the crew only saw threats once they appeared on their own scope, seconds, not minutes, to react. 3 kilometers south, the UJ-26 from the southern route probed through the storm. They had followed railway masking for 155 miles, rails and catenary wires creating radar clutter that Doctrine treated as maintenance traffic. By hugging exactly 122 meters altitude beneath the main lobe of the P-18 spoon rest at Salsk, they stayed invisible until final approach. Timing mattered. Ukrainian intel had a beat on the Panzer crew's shift change at 0230, a 10-minute handover when attention is split, and reaction lags. The drones punched in during that window of maximum vulnerability. They flew loose formation, eyes on each other via IR cameras while their nav degraded. Without GPS, they relied on terrain fixes in the rain. A river here, a roadway there, landmarks confirming course. But then the lead noted something odd. The railway lights that should be invisible were fully dark. Either the outage had spread beyond plan, or the Russians had sprung a trap. The Panzer gunner squinted at a rain-degraded thermal display, trying to parse true targets from phantoms. The manual tracking turret rotates at about 30 degrees west, barely enough for crossing targets at 180 km/h. Without radar, the gunner estimated range and lead like a W-endowed AA gunner, but with modern missiles and degraded sensors. A flicker of heat moved between trees, too steady for a bird, too hot for ground clutter. He slewed the turret, fighting sluggish hydraulics and lagging power. Crosshairs danced on a target as the fire control suite, built to work with microsecond radar inputs, struggled for 3 seconds to generate an optical solution. He pressed launch. Nothing. Battery voltage had dipped below the minimum for a clean missile sequence. He switched to emergency bypass, and on the second try, a 57 E6 roared from its tube. Exhaust flash briefly blinded the thermal optics. Launch is one thing, guidance is another. Panzer missiles use radio command to receive mid-course corrections. They rely on linked radar tracks. With supporting sensors, down the crew manually guided via joystick through rain-streaked optics, like trying to land a dart while riding a roller coaster in a storm. The radio link fizzled after 400 meters, another victim of the blackout. Unguided, the 57 E6 continued ballistic and sailed harmlessly above the target. When the missile went ballistic, the three drones scattered like fish evading a predator. The lead snapped left and dove, offering the smallest profile. The second jerked, right and climbed, forcing the gunner to choose. The third held course, betting the crew would chase the maneuvering targets. The scattering tactic exploited a hard human limit. You can only watch one target at a time. The thermal gunner tracked the climbing drone, the flashiest contact. By the time he checked his mistake, the lead had slipped behind a warehouse. $15 million of high-tech air defense reduced to a pyrotechnic show. The commander ordered another shot, but battery voltage was critically low. Backup power, designed for brief transients, wasn't built for sustained combat. The drones regrouped 500 meters from the station and synchronized their terminal run via onboard clocks. No radio chatter to betray them. Each would hit within 2 seconds of the others, drowning any remaining defenders in simultaneous impacts. Degraded displays showed the approach, but offered no cure. With defenders firing blind and top-line weapons hamstrung by power loss, nothing stood between the Beavers and their target. At 0241, 3 surviving UJ-26 Beavers converged on Salsk station from separate vectors. Their thermal cameras revealed Ukrainian planners' wildest hopes. A 38-car military consist sitting across multiple tracks, its manifest a butcher's list, hundreds of artillery and rocket munitions and diesel fuel waiting for an ignition. The attack executed like surgery. Each drone approached in an offset echelon at differing altitudes, 50, 100 and 150 meters, forcing any gunner to constantly adjust depression and lead, buying precious time. The lead's IR painted stark contrasts. The locomotive's boiler glowed white-hot, while fuel cars presented uniform thermal signatures, 60,000 liters of diesel apiece. Ammunition wagons read cooler, their armored walls and ventilation built to delay exactly the event about to occur. The first Beaver dove on the locomotive. The engineer heard sirens and could not accelerate the train to safety. Locos don't sprint like cars. He watched from his cab as the drone closed at about 50 ms. The shape charge struck the diesel compartment, molten copper jet punching through engine blocks, rupturing fuel and hydraulic lines. 38 cars now sat immobile on the rails. 6 seconds later, the second drone hit fuel car number 3, picked deliberately because it sat upwind of the ammo. The KZ-6 cut the shell. Diesel leaked beneath the train like a spreading river. Diesel doesn't blast like movie gasoline. It pours and finds hot metal, and here it did. The wrecked locomotive offered sources of ignition, and a lake of burning diesel spread fast. The third drone targeted an ammunition car near the train's center, the one selected to maximize sympathetic detonations. Pilots monitored each other's impacts via thermal feeds and adjusted in real time. Ukrainian intelligence had identified cars with the most lethal cargo. The KZ-6 punched the reinforced steel and detonated among pallets of 152mm rounds. The initial blast was contained by armor, but once fire reached adjacent cars, the chain reaction began. Burning diesel crawled into ammo cars, heat rose and sympathetic detonations cascaded, consuming the train. Russian statements later would claim 22 drones shot down that night, but smartphone live streams told a different story. Satellite visible smoke plumes and governor admissions that 2 tanks and a loco were damaged clashed with the official minimal accounting. The kilometer-wide smoke column argued otherwise. Bye for now.